Begins more or less in 1885 with the founding of the Indian National Congress. Congress Party leaders and other nationalists in India were usually from the elite classes. Initially, they didn't even demand independence from Britain, but they were interested in creating a modern Indian nation rather than a return to some ancient pre-colonial form, possibly because India was, and is, hugely diverse and really only unified into a single state when under imperial rule by one group or another, whether the Mauryans, the Guptas, the Mughals, or the British.
We constitute a majority of 70% against the caste Hindus in these homelands of ours. We want the division of India into Hindustan and Pakistan because that is the only practical solution which will secure freedom for both Hindus and Muslims and the achievement of stable and enduring governments of Hindustan and Pakistan, which I am confident will settle down as friends and neighbors like Canada and United States and other sovereign states, both in North and South America.
India had been dragged into the war without consulting its people. The Congress Working Committee met at Wardha on the 14th of September to discuss the grave crisis. The Congress issued a manifesto condemning the fascist aggression of Poland and said, "A free democratic India will gladly associate herself with the free nations for mutual defense against the aggression. If war is to defend the imperialist interests, then India can have nothing to do with it." The Congress condemned the Viceroy's declaration of India as a belligerent country without any reference to her people. The Congress declared, "Nothing short of complete independence can be accepted by the people of India. They alone can properly shape their own constitution and determine their relations with the other countries of the world."
The reality of partition was neither orderly nor nonviolent. About 12 million people were displaced as Hindus in Pakistan moved to India and Muslims in India moved to Pakistan. As people left their homes, sometimes unwillingly, there was violence, and all told, as many as 500,000 people were killed, more than died in the bloody Indonesian battle for independence. So while it's true that the massive protests that forced Britain to end its colonization of India were nonviolent, the emergence of the independent states involved really wasn't. Thanks, Tom. in the Salt March of 1930. So since the mid-19th century, the British had placed taxes on salt, and since salt, in addition to making food more delicious, is necessary to live, Gandhi saw these laws as a perfect example of how British despotism affected all Indians. Gandhi announced that he and a small group planned to march from his home in Ahmedabad to the coast in order to harvest salt. The march took almost 2 months and quickly gathered media attention from around the world, and the British Raj in India was forced to choose between arresting Gandhi for breaking a British law or else allowing him to break the law because he was harvesting salt illegally. Millions of Indians were inspired by Gandhi's challenge to British rule and began their own protests against the salt law. As civil disobedience spread across India, the British began to arrest people, and the international media focused even more on the protests, and popular opinion began to see British rule as unjust. By refusing to meet violent British rule with violence of his own and highlighting the injustice of British rule, Gandhi was able to use nonviolence as an effective tool in undermining the colonial regime. Like in his 1894 book, The Kingdom of God is Within You, Leo Tolstoy, who knew a little bit about war and peace, explored how Jesus' message to, quote, turn the other cheek was the basis for a life of nonviolence. He argued that governments and individuals needed to give up violence if they believed themselves to be true Christians, and Tolstoy also saw nonviolence as a solution to ending colonialism. In 1908, Tolstoy wrote a letter to a Hindu, to Mohandas Gandhi, and in the letter he explained that Indians needed to confront British imperialism with love and nonviolence. Gandhi not only read that letter, he also published it in his South African newspaper Indian Opinion in 1909, and Tolstoy's ideas and his correspondence with Gandhi marked the beginning of an informal dialogue between advocates of nonviolence from around the world that spanned the 20th century. And Tolstoy wasn't the only influence on Mohandas K. Gandhi. He'd grown up in the Gujarat region of India, where there's a sizable Jain community. And through the Jain monks, Gandhi was exposed to the idea of ahimsa, non-violence or non-injury to life. He also read widely, including Western writers like John Ruskin and Henry David Thoreau.
War broke out over the territory of Kashmir. This violence left up to 1 million dead and millions more homeless. In 1965, the two countries fought a second war over Kashmir. In 1971, a rebellion broke out in East Pakistan, leading to a third war on the subcontinent, and resulting in the formation of Bangladesh. Today, after a fourth crisis in 1999, the two nuclear-armed nations remain in a tense standoff.